They were certain you were cornered. No hesitation, no doubt. In their minds, the snare was flawless. The conclusion preordained. They had already practiced their triumphant speech, already visualized your defeat. That's how sure they were. But here is the reality. Arrogance built on deception is brittle, and the instant you declined to perform your part, their entire scheme shattered into pieces. The quiet that came after wasn't tranquility. It was the stunned silence of adversaries realizing the Anointed One didn't falter where they were certain you would. That silence was thick, saturated with their incredulity, their fury, their desperate attempts to re-script the finale they believed was theirs to command. Look around. The mood has transformed. You can almost sense the heaviness of their botched conspiracy lingering in the space. It's that peculiar strain you only perceive after a tempest has moved on. The world is hushed, but not due to serenity. It's because your foes are concealed, murmuring, recalculating their missteps. They constructed the platform. They aimed the spotlight, convinced you would stumble into it oblivious. Instead, you swung that beam back onto them. Their expressions betrayed them. Their rehearsed compassion disintegrated. Their narratives started to contradict each other. What they deemed impeccable became clumsy under your gaze. You didn't merely sidestep the snare, you revealed it. And that, Anointed Ones, is what ignites their rage. Not your escape, but your perception. You required no dossier of evidence. You sensed the vibration. You detected the nuance. You observed the odd change in rhythm. The two immaculate coincidences. You spotted the fingerprints they were sure they had erased. Do you comprehend how terrifying that is for someone whose influence is rooted in deceit? To be perceived before they even execute their plan. That is what consumes them. Before we delve further, I want to pause and express my gratitude for your presence. This is not about a single voice. It's about a unified chorus. Every like, every comment, every subscription amplifies this message and propels it onward. If you are walking this path, press that button. For together, our resonance is stronger than any trap they devise. Now, let's go deeper. Their design didn't just falter in secret, it crumbled in the open. They anticipated your panic, your collapse, your unraveling. Instead, you offered them serenity. You offered them poise. You offered them the one thing they never anticipated: lucidity. That moment you looked at them, not with terror or uncertainty, but with that quiet understanding that communicates, "I am fully aware of your actions." That gaze destabilized them. It robbed their act of all power, leaving them visible under the very spotlight they engineered for you. This is the source of their fury, because the trap was not merely ineffective, it recoiled upon them. The vigor they expended to break you has now reversed. They are the ones mired in bewilderment, in aggravation, in wrath, re-examining every element of their collapse. They believed they could forecast your next move. They were convinced they could dictate your response. But the divinely aligned do not follow scripts authored by adversaries. You don't enter a cage just because someone adorned it with blossoms. You don't drink from a vessel just because it glitters. You perceived the flaws in their tale, and you trusted the inner stillness that whispered, "Wait, this isn't right." That stillness was your salvation, and that is why Providence continually positions you a step ahead. Not paranoia, not overanalysis, but a honed instinct to trust what the oblivious dismiss. The inflection, the hesitation, the shift in a person's aura when they conceal something. It is an ability forged in survival, refined by ordeal, and it is the precise reason their snares appear transparent to you, even when they seem undetectable to all others. Now, they possess nothing but their own bitterness. Resentment that you didn't fracture. Resentment that you didn't perform your role. Resentment that the narrative they composed in shadows was torn apart in the light. They are incensed because their flawless design didn't just misfire. It made them appear foolish, and nothing enrages a deceiver more than being unveiled by the very individual they presumed was controllable. So, this is where it gets real. This isn't merely a tale about a trap. It's about how you perceived it, how you deconstructed it, and why they are now seething. If you are here, nodding, feeling that quiet affirmation within, then you understand this message was destined for you. I want you to pause for a moment and leave a comment below with the number 77, because that number declares, "I perceive the illusion. I trust my insight and I cannot be deceived. That single action is more than a comment. It is a proclamation, a testament that you stand in your authority even as they forfeit theirs. And trust me when I say, if you are truly walking as one of the chosen, you won't just hear this passively. You will feel compelled to remain until the final word, because this story is not over. It is evolving, and every step is critical. So lean in, stay focused, for the deeper we journey, the more evident it becomes that their rage is the confirmation of your triumph. Now let's analyze this, step by step. And believe me, you will not want to miss what follows. They mistook your quiet for ignorance. Never confuse silent observation with a lack of understanding. Often, the most lethal strike is the one never anticipated. They were convinced they had you deciphered. They witnessed your calm, your forbearance, your capacity to let minor things pass. In their vanity, they persuaded themselves you were gullible. To them, you were soft, easily shaped, easily manipulated, easily broken. They misinterpreted your compassion as frailty, your generosity as naivety, and your silence as a lack of intellect. But silence is not emptiness. It doesn't mean you were unaware. It signifies you were archiving every particular, every slip, every artificial grin, every fissure in their facade. You weren't adrift. You were recording the entire production. Let's be clear. Such individuals prosper on mirage. They endure by persuading others they are more intelligent, more cunning. And when they saw you standing placidly, they thought ideal, an easy mark. That was their fatal miscalculation, because the anointed don't need to yell to confirm their awareness. You were gathering testimony in the gloom while they performed under the lights. You were observing how their deeds never matched their declarations, how their energy would alter when truth approached, how their praises always carried a subtle hint of manipulation. They assumed you weren't attentive, but you were deciphering the very mechanics of their falsehoods. And here is the part that wounds them most deeply. You permitted them to believe they were prevailing. You didn't rush to reveal them. You didn't expend your energy on arguments. You didn't grant them the pleasure of seeing you break. Instead, you gave them leash. And like every fool blinded by pride, they used it to fashion their own noose. Your restraint was not ignorance. It was tactics. You comprehended something they never could. Unmasking a liar prematurely only allows them to distort, to refute, to portray you as the unstable one. So, you waited. You let them accumulate their own inconsistencies. You let them excavate a pit so profound that when you finally spoke, there was no escape. Isn't that more devastating than any insult you could have hurled in the heat of the moment? Consider it. They anticipated panic, appeals, that you would follow their script. Instead, you observed with a composure that frightens people more than fury ever can. Your calm was an instrument. Your stillness was a plan. Your silence was the rumble before the storm. And when you finally acted, it was not disorderly. It was exact, surgical, irrefutable. A single utterance from you laid bare the entire architecture of their plot. That is why they are not just ashamed. They are horrified. Because if you detected this, what else have you witnessed? What else are you retaining that remains unrevealed? Let me ask you, chosen one, have you observed how the most enraged people in your story now are the ones who thought they had you in their grasp? The ones who vowed you were susceptible? The ones who sneered behind your back? Why do you think their wrath burned so intensely? It is because they weren't just revealed. They were exposed by the very person they undervalued the most. That disgrace cuts more deeply than any direct assault. It's one thing to be defeated by a rival you respect, but to be defeated by the person you mocked, the one you labeled slow, the one you believed you could control, that humiliation devours them. This is where the metaphor strikes home. You were never their quarry. You were the tracker who allowed the hunt to disclose itself. While they scattered bait to draw you in, you were tracing their footsteps. While they performed counterfeit smiles, you were noting the tension in their jaw, the quiver in their speech, the way their accounts shifted based on their audience. They were acting. You were decrypting. And in the end, who truly wielded the power? The truth is, people like this don't fear disapproval. They fear being truly perceived. And you saw them entirely. That is the reason their fury is so deafening now. They cannot erase what you observed. They cannot re-script the history you lived. and they cannot dismiss the memory of your tranquil expression when you let them know, without uttering a word, "I knew everything." That look alone was sufficient to fracture their illusion. Here is the harsh reality they refuse to confront. The very softness they ridiculed is the same attribute that dismantled them. Your capacity to listen, to empathize, to detect what others overlook, that is what rendered you dangerous. They believed sensitivity made you fragile. In truth, it made you unshakable because you were not reacting from impulse. You were responding from understanding. You weren't floundering in doubt. You were awaiting the perfect moment to act. And when you did, it was already far too late for them. Now they sit amid the wreckage of their own conceit. They replay every discussion, every fabricated smile, every staged act of benevolence, questioning which part exposed them. They lie awake, seething, not merely because you eluded their trap, but because you never even entered it. That is the injury that will not mend. That is the disgrace they cannot shed, and fundamentally, they recognize they can never deceive you again. So let this brand itself upon your spirit. Their error was presuming your silence indicated ignorance. But silence is not stupidity. Silence is strength. Silence is endurance. Silence is the gradual, relentless honing of the blade. And when it finally cuts, it requires no clamor to make its mark. It leaves scars they will bear permanently. They believed you were 10 steps behind. In reality, you were 10 steps ahead. And that is the source of their fury. Because they didn't just lose the game. They never even understood you were the one authoring the rules from the start. You allowed them to construct their own prison. The ultimate retribution for a deceiver is not to be halted prematurely. It is to be permitted to complete the masterpiece of their own ruin. They thought you were passive. They thought you were too delayed to comprehend. Each time they positioned a piece, they exchanged conceited glances, as if you were blindly advancing into their net. What they failed to grasp was that you weren't stumbling forward. You were observing step by step, allowing them to disclose every concealed card, every tactic, every intention. You didn't interrupt the show. You gave them the platform, and in doing so, you gave them sufficient space to hang themselves with their own script. Exposure demands completion. A half-built lie can still be concealed, but a finished trap reveals its architect. Visualize this: someone assembling a snare in the center of the room. If you interrupt them midway, they will conceal it, erase their tracks, pretend they never meant any harm. But if you let them finish, if you let them depart believing they have crafted the perfect trap, the proof remains on its own. That is precisely what you did. You let them complete the installation so that when the truth emerged, there would be no retreat, no disavowal, no "you're just overreacting." You let their pride become the nails in their own coffin. And that is what terrifies them most now, not just that you didn't succumb, but that you let them proceed so far that they revealed themselves completely. Had you challenged them early, they would have dismissed it. They would have acted ignorant, inverted the narrative, depicted you as hysterical, paranoid. You've seen it before, but you denied them that opportunity this time. You held your peace. You gave them leash. And when their facade finally crumbled, there was no restoring it. Patience is not frailty. It is strategy. Silence is not ignorance. It is the collection of evidence. Reflect on it. Isn't that what makes your power so disquieting to them? That serene refusal to disrupt their performance? While they conspired, you were chronicling. While they staged altruism, you were logging the dissonance between their body language and their words. While they feigned concern, you noted the delay in their gaze, the rigidity in their grin. They thought you were acquiescing, purchasing the act, but you were the spectator who had already read the script. And here is the question tormenting them now. If they saw through this, what else did they see? That is the paranoia consuming them, because they know this wasn't their first scheme. They know this wasn't the inaugural time they staged something against you. But this time, they were caught in the act. And once someone demonstrates they can see behind the curtain, the mirage is permanently broken. Imagine a spider weaving its web with perfect accuracy, convinced the fly is already caught. But when the light falls, the spider realizes it is the one entangled in its own threads. That is the scene they are trapped within. They thought the web was for you. They didn't comprehend they were the one in the center, exposed, unable to move without tearing apart the very trap they built. That is the elegance of your strategy. You didn't resist. You didn't struggle. You simply let them continue weaving until their own vanity rendered escape unattainable. And now, with the spotlight shining, the entire stage reveals not your descent, but their design. And tell me, chosen one, doesn't it feel almost poetic to know that the very arrogance they used to mock you is the very thing that annihilated them? They believed patience meant weakness. They believed empathy meant blindness. They believed silence meant stupidity, but you weaponized all three. You let them believe they were in command, and that false assurance propelled them into overexposure. They overplayed their hand. They revealed their tells, and when the curtain fell, they were the only ones left standing, culpable under the light. Now they cannot rationalize it away. It's too apparent, too intricate, too thoroughly documented. Their hands are soiled and there is no cleansing them, and here is what fuels their rage even hotter. You didn't respond with the bedlam they anticipated. You didn't plead for clarity. You didn't struggle to remain in their narrative. You departed with composure, lucidity, and that unnerving smile that stated, "I saw everything, and I don't even require revenge." The most profound defeat is not when your adversary retaliates. It is when they walk away, leaving you exposed in your own disarray. That is why they are furious, because you denied them the gratification of a reaction. You didn't crumble. You didn't weep before them. You didn't debate or strive to prove your value. You simply let the trap implode under its own mass and walked away unshackled. That is power, and it drives them to insanity. They stand now with a guilt they cannot erase, evidence they cannot delete, and a story they cannot control. Imagine a magician executing a trick for the crowd, expecting acclaim. But halfway through, the assistant pulls back the curtain and reveals every hidden wire, every mirror. The audience gasps, not at the illusion but at the fraud behind it. The magician isn't just embarrassed, they are ruined. That is the level of exposure you delivered to your adversaries, and they will never forgive you for it. So remember this: you didn't elude their trap by chance. You dismantled it with strategy. You knew what they were doing, and you let them finish because you understood the truth. Only completion reveals exposure. That is why your silence resonated louder than any confrontation. That is why your calm inflicted deeper wounds than any scream. And that is why they are furious beyond measure. They set the perfect snare. They thought the story was already written, but you inverted the script. You let them play themselves. And now the world doesn't perceive you as the victim. It sees them as the fraud. That is the triumph they can never erase. 3. They designed a trap for a ghost, not the person you are today. The cruelest error your enemies make is battling the yesterday version of you, failing to realize that individuals cease to exist the moment you evolved beyond them. The setup was not random. It was tailor-made. They crafted it meticulously using the memory of who you once were. They built it for the one who once accepted disrespect in the name of love, for the one who swallowed anguish to preserve peace, for the one who ignored the warning signs because beginning anew felt more daunting than remaining confined. That was the blueprint they employed. But here is the devastating truth. They engineered their scheme for a version of you that no longer exists. They studied your history, not your evolution. They thought they knew your vulnerabilities, but they were analyzing obsolete data, expired intelligence. And while they were constructing a cage for the old you had already slipped out and matured into someone untouchable. The very pain they once inflicted upon you became the training ground that sharpened your vision and fortified your spirit. That pain erected boundaries they never anticipated. Imagine a thief attempting to break into a house using a key you lost years ago. They insert the key, expecting the door to open only to find the lock has been changed. That is exactly what occurred here. They arrived with guilt trips, with false vows, with fabricated loyalty wrapped in sweet words, thinking the door would swing open. But it remained sealed because you are not that person any longer. And doesn't it wound them now to realize the emotional, overly forgiving, overly explanatory, overly sacrificing version has disappeared? They were relying on the person who would assume blame merely to resolve everything, the one who would plead to be understood. Instead, they encountered someone stronger, calmer, sharper, someone willing to walk away from what once felt insurmountable to abandon. That is why their plan failed. They tailored it for a phantom. They rehearsed a script for a character that no longer walks this earth. And when you appeared, silent yet unshakable, they realized they had nothing. That is what consumes them, the realization that growth transformed their perfect setup into a perfect failure. They hunted the shadow of who you were, but you arrived as the storm of who you have become. They attempted to turn your wounds into weapons, but you transformed their weapons into ash. They delved into your past seeking ammunition, not realizing you had already melted those bullets down and forged armor from them. They thought they were clever. They gathered fragments of your history like ordnance, convinced your scars would still bleed when pressed. Childhood pain, insecurities, the trust you once gave too freely, the errors you made when you knew less. They stockpiled it all. To them, these were not merely memories. They were strategies. They assumed if they pushed the same buttons, they'd elicit the same reaction. They wanted the predictable you, the fragile you, the version that fractured under pressure. But here is their miscalculation. You have studied yourself more profoundly than they ever could. Imagine a hacker trying to infiltrate a system with outdated passwords, only to discover the entire operating system has been upgraded. That is what they confronted. While they were memorizing your old triggers, you were healing. While they were rehearsing your past mistakes, you were rewriting your patterns. While they were attempting to manipulate you with phantoms of abandonment and silence, you were learning to stand in solitude without collapsing. Your past may explain you, but it no longer defines you. They resurrected dysfunction, familial wounds, betrayal, all believing it would paralyze you as it once did. But you didn't go numb this time. You became lucid. They anticipated tears but received stillness. They expected arguments but received silence. Not the silence of frailty, but the silence that terrifies manipulators, because it signifies they have lost all control. And doesn't it sting them now? They were prepared for the version of you that begged for closure, that craved validation, that would have contorted herself into knots to earn crumbs of affection. But you no longer require their apology. You no longer need their approval. You built a foundation they never saw because they weren't seeking strength. They were seeking fractures. Imagine them entering the battlefield brandishing blades from your past. But you appeared wearing armor forged from every laceration they ever inflicted. That is why their strategy collapsed. They weaponized what they believed they knew, but you triumphed with what they disregarded. Your growth, your discernment, your peace, and peace, when wielded by someone who is healed, is the most terrifying weapon of all. You didn't merely outsmart them. You revealed the hands controlling their strings. When you see the puppeteer, the puppets lose their power. You didn't just defeat the individuals in front of you. You journeyed deeper, far deeper than they ever imagined. While they occupied themselves with bait, distractions, and cheap emotional tricks, you were tracing the strings back to their source. You refused to become entangled in surface-level betrayal. You weren't merely sidestepping drama, you were dismantling an entire operation. Visualize a chessboard crowded with pawns moving against you. Most would panic at the pieces. You tilted the board until the player behind them was revealed. That is what unsettled them. You didn't just observe their actions. You perceived who was guiding them. The timing, the repetition, the uncanny familiarity of their maneuvers. It all disclosed a hidden blueprint. Conversations felt scripted. Individuals materialized at perfect moments, delivering the same recycled lines. It wasn't random. It was too precise, too polished, too intentional. They weren't moving independently. They were being directed, and here is the aspect that disturbs them most. You didn't react with chaos. You observed with clarity. While others would have been lost in the noise of betrayal, you remained silent, studying patterns. You realized many of them weren't even thinking for themselves. They were pawns, reiterating moves fed to them. Jealousy, envy, sabotage, call it what you will, the fingerprints were unmistakable. They were being utilized as extensions of something larger, something that had been circling your life for years. That is why the assaults felt personal. That is why they struck with such accuracy. Most people combat the knife. You looked past the blade and stared directly into the hand gripping it. That is when everything shifted. You ceased wasting energy trying to repair people who were already programmed against you. You stopped defending yourself against insults and instead analyzed the intention behind them. And in that lucidity, the mask slipped. The puppeteers were exposed. Once you saw them, the entire performance forfeited its power. And now they are not just angry you survived. They are terrified you perceived them. Because once the strings are visible, the game concludes. You didn't merely outmaneuver pawns. You apprehended the one moving the pieces. And that is a truth they can never erase. They performed a show, but you had read the script before the curtain rose. The most dangerous spectator is the one who already knows the conclusion. They believed they were impeccable actors. Every line rehearsed, every smile timed, every gesture meticulously crafted to make you believe. To outsiders, they seemed convincing, playing the victim when it suited them, the hero when they desired applause, the loyal friend when they needed your defenses lowered. But what they didn't know is that you weren't merely watching the performance. You had already read the script. Imagine sitting in a theater, the audience gasping at every twist, every on-stage betrayal. But you are calm, almost indifferent, because you already know how the play ends. That was the position you occupied. While they delivered their lines with artificial conviction, you were detecting every pause, every slip, every abrupt change in tone. You didn't require hard evidence initially. Your intuition was already vocalizing the truth. Intuition is the rehearsal the universe provides before the performance starts, so you let them act. You didn't interrupt. You gave them the stage, the lights, the audience. You let them arrange their props and plant their false evidence. Why? Because you knew that exposing them prematurely would allow them to distort it. They would twist your truth into drama. So you remained silent, permitting the script to unfold until they ensnared themselves in their own dialogue. And here is what devastated them most. You were already detached. They believed they still possessed your attention, your emotions, your trust. But in reality, you had disengaged long before opening night. You were simply awaiting the final curtain. That is why, when the last scene arrived, when the betrayal reached its climax, you didn't applaud, you didn't weep, you didn't plead for answers. You simply walked away. They had written you into their narrative as the victim, but you exited the stage as the critic who terminated the production. That is what infuriates them now. They labored tirelessly to create the perfect performance. But the audience they coveted most, the chosen one, was already familiar with every scene. And nothing shatters a liar more than realizing their script never held power over the person they sought to deceive. You let the serpent approach, then severed its head with one clean stroke. Patience is not fear. It is the honing of the blade before the strike. You sensed it the instant the atmosphere shifted. The tone of their voice became unnatural. The energy soured. The silence began humming with suspicion. That wasn't paranoia. It was awareness. You detected the betrayal before it even had a name. But instead of reacting as they hoped, you did something that rattled them to their foundation. You remained motionless. You didn't retaliate. You didn't expose them. You didn't furnish them with the chaos they craved. You simply waited. Imagine observing a serpent slither nearer, tongue flicking, body coiling. Most would panic, flail, flee, but not you. You knew precisely what it was, and you knew that eliminating a serpent demands precision. If you strike too soon, you miss and it escapes. But if you allow it to glide closer, 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 you take one clean shot and it never rises again. That is the wisdom you carried. Stillness is not surrender. It is strategy in disguise. They misconstrued your quiet for weakness. They thought your calm indicated fear. What they failed to see was the calculation behind it. While they spun their falsehoods, you catalogued every detail. While they whispered behind your back, you tracked the connections. While they believed they were binding you tighter, you were permitting them to inscribe the entire confession in their own handwriting. And then, when the moment arrived, you moved with precision. No theatrics, no warning. One decisive action and their entire scheme disintegrated. That is why they are shaken now, because they thought they had more time. They thought they were still in command, but you were never participating in their game. You were waiting for the exact instant where denial was impossible, where exposure was absolute, where the strike would permit no recovery. They depended on your emotions, but you were seated upon strategy. That is why they are humiliated, bewildered, and furious simultaneously, because you didn't just endure. You dismantled everything in moments. And now the serpent is gone, its power severed at the root, and they are left gazing upon the wreckage of their own arrogance. They believed your kindness was a muzzle, but you shattered the silence with truth. Silence in the face of deception is not kindness. It is complicity, and you refuse to carry their transgressions on your tongue any longer. They wagered everything on your gentleness. They were convinced your loyalty would keep you quiet forever. They assumed you would swallow the truth to safeguard their image, that you would keep secrets to evade conflict, that you would value peace over justice, and for a time they were correct. You did remain silent. You granted them the benefit of the doubt. You told yourself the drama wasn't worthwhile. You let things pass, not because you were unaware, but because you didn't want to be the one to rupture the illusion. But that so-called peace was never peace at all. It was a prison, and you felt it every time you restrained your words. They weren't just hiding in the shadows, they were hiding behind you. Your kindness became their shield. Your silence became their cover. They were counting on you to be too loyal, too forgiving, too fearful of judgment to ever speak. Imagine being the mask someone wears to conceal their deformity. That was the role they assigned you. But here is where their plan fragmented. You reached a point of transformation. That flash of clarity when you recognize that silence in the face of wrongdoing makes you a silent accomplice. And once that truth anchored itself, everything transformed. You ceased protecting people who would never protect you. You stopped mistaking kindness for passivity. You stopped allowing loyalty to chain you to deceivers. And that is when their dread commenced, because now they could no longer guilt you into silence. They could no longer purchase your quiet with false affection. They could no longer lean on your tender heart to obscure their dark deeds. You selected truth over comfort, justice over pretense, and that terrified them, not because you shouted or raged, but because you did it calmly, decisively, with a lucidity that could not be distorted. The truth doesn't require anger to destroy a lie. It simply requires air. That is why they tremble now, because you didn't ruin their image. The truth did. And the one thing they believed they possessed indefinitely, your silence, was the very instrument you converted into their downfall. They wanted you to erupt, but your composure caused their mask to crumble. When your peace remains unbroken, their performance fails. They attempted everything to provoke you. They pressed on old wounds, probed insecurities, slipped insults beneath their breath, even orchestrated minor humiliations in front of others. Their objective wasn't merely to injure you, it was to bait you. They desired a spectacle. They wanted you to lose control so they could point and declare, "See, that is their true nature." They weren't seeking truth, they were seeking ammunition, but you didn't supply them with the show. You recognized the setup for what it was. A trap designed to utilize your reaction as proof. And instead of lashing out, you stood in stillness. You let silence communicate. You let poise bear the weight. That is what broke them, because the one thing they never prepared for was your peace. Imagine someone jabbing at a power outlet expecting sparks, only to discover the wires have been severed. They thought they knew your triggers. They didn't know you had already disconnected them through healing. What they labeled suppression was actually strategy. You weren't afraid to fight. You simply refused to fight on their stage. And that decision inverted everything, because when you didn't react, their tactics began to appear suspicious. Your calm became a mirror. Their tone grew sharper. Their narratives tangled. Their masks slipped inch by inch. What was intended to be your exposure became their unraveling. The spotlight they wanted on you turned, blazing directly through them. Your restraint was not weakness. It was the trapdoor they plummeted through. And that is what gnaws at them now. They desired chaos. They received clarity. They wanted you to crumble. Instead, they fractured. And the truth emerged, not because you screamed it, but because they couldn't maintain their performance without your reaction to sustain it. You didn't just survive the test. You reversed it. You didn't furnish them with the reaction they wanted. You gave them revelation instead. And that is the victory they cannot expunge. 10. They authored the script, but the universe inverted the ending. The trap they staged for your collapse became the platform for their exposure. They thought they had it all charted. The betrayal, the whispers, the impeccably timed downfall they were certain would shatter you. Every step was choreographed like a scripted drama. They desired tears, rage, humiliation. They wanted the final act to be your breakdown. That was the payoff they staked everything on. But then the plot slipped from their grasp. Just when it seemed the narrative was tilting in their favor, the script flipped. Doors they vowed were locked against you suddenly swung ajar. People they had poisoned with lies began questioning the story. The anguish they planted to break you became the fire that molded you into something more resilient. Instead of the meltdown they anticipated, you experienced a breakthrough none of them foresaw. Imagine viewing a film where the villain controls every scene. Then midway, the plot shifts and their entire scheme unravels on screen. They believed designing the setup meant controlling the outcome, but they overlooked the most crucial truth. You are not a character in their story. You walk with a purpose grander than their script, and no manipulation can rewrite that. They tried to direct your downfall, but the performance collapsed mid-scene. And here is what wounded them most profoundly. The very stage they constructed for your humiliation became the platform for their exposure. What they intended to use against you revealed them instead. Their whispers transformed into evidence. Their timing became suspect. Their perfect plan disclosed the patterns they attempted to conceal. Justice does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it moves in silence, shifting the terrain until the deceivers fall through their own fissures. That is why they are furious now. They thought they had won, but you didn't just survive. You ascended. You didn't just recover. You transformed. The very setup they built became the mirror reflecting their own corruption. And you walked away not with vengeance, but with alignment, standing serene while their entire production burned to the ground behind you. You were not positioned to break. You were positioned to document their every move. Some individuals are paper receipts. You became the living receipt they can never nullify. They thought you were placed into that scenario to crumble, to be crushed under the weight of betrayal and lies. They believed you were positioned there as the sacrifice, the casualty. But that was never the design. You were not there to fall. You were there to witness. You were there to observe the operation from the interior. Every whisper, every artificial smile, every blade plunged behind your back. You weren't trapped. You were chronicling the truth they vowed would remain hidden. Imagine being placed in the heart of a storm, not to drown, but to observe who swims, who sinks, and who attempts to pull you under. That is what happened to you. They assumed the chaos would bury you, but it honed you instead. Every lie unveiled another stratum. Every betrayal stripped away another layer of the mask. Every silence from those who should have defended you disclosed where their loyalty truly resided. They thought the pain would shatter you, but the pain became your microscope. It compelled you to study the patterns, the alliances, the system that had been operating unchecked for years. And here is what makes them livid now. While they thought you were emotional prey, you were quietly becoming the archivist of their downfall. You ceased asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What is the lesson?" You stopped weeping for validation and started noting the evidence. You didn't require screenshots or recordings. You became the living proof. Your survival, your clarity, your refusal to collapse, that became the undeniable receipt that their trap had failed. They wanted you silenced, but your very existence became the most resonant testimony. Now your presence convicts them, not because you shout, not because you accuse, but because you carry the truth in your demeanor. You emerged not embittered but lucid, not destroyed but dangerous, because you retained details no one else dared to see. They thought you were weak, but you were positioned there for a reason, not to break, but to bear witness. And that is what they will never escape. Your smile was the silent verdict that shattered their script. Nothing disconcerts a liar more than the smile of the individual who already knows the truth. They thought the setup was impregnable. The lies were stacked. The distractions were planted. The people surrounding you were rehearsed and prepared. From the exterior, it appeared you were being cornered with no escape. They leaned in, awaiting panic in your eyes, awaiting confusion, awaiting your collapse under pressure. But instead you smiled, and that smile was not ignorance. It was not the vacant grin of someone too blind to perceive the peril. It was the serene curve of someone who had already deciphered the game. Imagine a poker table where every player is bluffing, certain they have fooled you, until you recline and smile, holding the winning hand. That is the power your silence carried. A tranquil smile amid chaos is more terrifying than a scream. That is what they could not process. Your expression didn't align with the scene they had constructed. You were not supposed to appear steady. You were not supposed to carry that quiet assurance. But your smile communicated everything your lips didn't need to utter. It stated, "I see through all of this. You are not in control here. I already know how this concludes," and that is what drove them mad. They had banked on fear disarming you. Instead, your peace disarmed them. Your smile was not weakness. It was a verdict. It was the quiet proclamation that the setup had already failed. Every time you appeared, calm, unshaken, still radiant, still extending grace. Even while fully conscious of the betrayal, they fractured a little further. Imagine constructing a stage for someone's downfall, only to watch them stand there smiling, as if they authored the conclusion themselves. That is why they are unraveling now. Because that smile stripped the power from their falsehoods. It demonstrated you were not broken, you were not flinching, and you were not performing the role they assigned you. It was strategy, it was evidence, it was your method of showing them that no scheme against you could succeed. Not today, not ever. You sensed the shift in the air before their betrayal even landed. Energy never lies. Actions merely arrive late to confirm it. You didn't require anyone to whisper in your ear. You didn't require tangible proof or dramatic confirmation long before their betrayal materialized in words or deeds. You felt it in the atmosphere. The mood altered. It wasn't loud or conspicuous. It was subtle, quiet, disquieting. A pause that felt wrong. A tone that suddenly carried frost. A silence that once felt secure, now burdened with secrets. Most would have dismissed it, but you could not. Your awareness does not overlook shifts like that. The frequency was discordant. The laughter was present but hollow. The conversation flowed, but devoid of the connection it once held. On the surface, nothing had changed, but beneath, something had already fractured. That is when you knew the betrayal wasn't approaching. It had already commenced quietly within their heart. Imagine standing on a shore before a storm. The sky still appears calm, but the air tastes different. The wind shifts, the water recedes. You don't see the wave yet, but you know it is coming. That is precisely what you sensed. They believed they could feign loyalty, feign love, feign presence until they were ready to strike. They were convinced their mask was seamless. But energy does not wear masks, and your awareness detected it entirely. So when their actions ultimately revealed the truth, you were not shocked. You had already prepared. That internal alarm granted you the space to detach, to guard your peace, to withdraw before the facade fell. They anticipated devastation. What they received was composure. They wanted you blindsided. What they received was someone who had already perceived it in the unseen. The betrayal did not break you because by the time it landed, you had already constructed your shield. And that is what they will never comprehend. They thought you were caught off guard, but the reality is you were strides ahead. You felt the shift before the knife was ever drawn, and that is why their plan failed before it even commenced. Their magnum opus was intended to break you. Instead, it exposed them. The most satisfying retribution is surviving the tempest they engineered to bury you. This was not haphazard. This was not impulsive. They did not assemble this trap overnight. No. This was their prideful project, meticulously crafted, layered with deceit, polished with charm, and fueled by whispers in every darkened corridor. To them, this was the perfect configuration, the final strike, the grand culmination that would silence you, discredit you, and leave you humiliated. They weren't just hopeful. They were certain. They envisioned the scene in detail. Your collapse, your disintegration, your descent from grace. But here is what shatters them. You did not fall. You did not break. You did not plead for mercy or spiral into chaos. Instead, you stood immovable. You grew quieter. You let your calm extend longer than their turmoil. And while they expected you to self-destruct, you gave them something far worse: endurance. Imagine someone igniting a fire to demolish your house, only to return and find you standing in the ashes, unscathed, constructing something even grander. That is what you accomplished. You outlasted their performance. The lies began cracking under their own weight. The smear campaign lost momentum. The gossip started to sound recycled, empty, incredible. You didn't need to defend yourself. The truth began defending you, and now their fury knows no bounds. Because not only did you survive, you flourished. You continued ascending when they needed you interred. You continued shining when they wanted you dimmed. Your very presence is a reminder that their grand design, their so-called masterpiece, failed catastrophically. Nothing humiliates a manipulator more than watching the person they targeted radiate more brightly in the aftermath of their scheme. That is why they are unraveling now. Individuals are beginning to ask questions. Their mask is slipping. The narrative no longer holds. And every step you take forward, every measure of peace you carry, incinerates them with the memory of their failure. They set the perfect trap. They invested everything in it. And instead of celebrating your downfall, they are compelled to watch you rise higher than ever. And so, chosen ones, we complete the circle. The traps, the lies, the betrayals, all of it was supposed to be your ending. Instead, it became their exposure and your elevation. You didn't just survive, you rewrote the script. Every move they made to bury you only demonstrated how unstoppable you are when you stand in truth, and now it is your turn. Leave the number 77 in the comments if you know their plan has already failed. Like this video.